Yuta versus Kenjaku, a clash that has been hyped up since Yuta's declaration in Sendai that he alone would kill Kenjaku. But what if, instead of Tengen asking Yuki to stay behind, Yuta would be the one to guard Tengen's place with Choso, and would he have successfully defeated Kenjaku? Now, this what if there will be two scenarios. Scenario A, where I'll go through the exact planning that Yuki and Tengen had and decide whether this would lead to a different conclusion or not, with this being Yuta instead of Yuki. And in scenario B, I freestyle what could occur plus add some what if situation. If you enjoy videos like this, make sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, and stay tuned for part 2 where I put Yuki in the Sendai colony. So Yuta would then begin the planning with Tengen in a similar manner such as Yuki did. Now I know there's going to be one person in the comments, Yuta is a special grade, he likes to fight alone. Well, wait for scenario B. Now that has been addressed, the dialogue between Tengen and Yuta would be nowhere near as interesting as Yuki revealing about being a star plasma vessel. But one thing I'd like to see in this situation is if Yuta asks questions about his clan origin, and with Tengen living in the Heian era, asking information in regard to Michizani, which would add some interesting lore about one of the 3 vengeful spirits. Aside from that, I don't think there's really any other dialogue between them that isn't focused on the plan, and it would stay the same with their current focus is to use Choso to make him use a curse technique. So this would play exactly like it did last time, and you'll get some father-son abuse with Kenjaku stepping on Choso, and Choso will come in clutch with the supernova, revealing Kenjaku's hidden curse technique of anti-gravity. Yuta Kotsu will debut with his speech, "Good job Choso. Now watch how a real special grade handles business." Author's comments, will this be Yuta's dying words or a declaration of victory? Find out next week. Not gonna lie, I could write manga because this dialogue is pretty on point if I speak for myself. But Yuta will begin in a similar manner. Kenjaku will use Ganesha as a test drive. And well, Yuta gets removed as an obstacle and the series is over. Thank you for watching. No, but seriously, with how Ganesha is supposed to work, it does pose some interesting conversations. First it says uses concepts against curse technique targets. But my interpretation is that it would remove a curse technique that tried to harm the user. The only contradiction is the army members went flying without using a curse technique. So my conclusion is 1. Yuta starts flying in the air and midway uses curse speech to kill Ganesha. Or 2. Yuta turns into Barry Allen and then outputs positive reverse curse technique to get rid of the curse. Or 3. He loses to Ganesha, which just sounds terrible. From these scenarios, number 1 looks more likely, and this means that Yuta would have used his ring with Rika, meaning he now has 5 minutes to fight against Kenjaku. One thing I want to mention is how different this would be for numerous of reasons because of how they match up. First, Kenjaku did not have any information on Yuki's curse technique, so Ganesha was used as a test to gather information. However, not only does Kenjaku have Geto's memories, he would have accessed all his abilities due to his influence in the higher ups. 2. This fight would not play out the same as previous because of Yuta not being at full power, and this means that he would not have access to sky manipulation or Drew Shikigami, as he did not go to Sendai beforehand, which makes him a lot less versatile. Currently the only copy technique he'd have is curse speech, which wouldn't be overly useful in a long clash with Kenjaku, but continuing the what if after Ganesha is dead, he will not have the same relevation as he did with Yuki, because he'll 1. have pre-counter measures to deal with Yuta, and 2. can actually use curse spirit manipulation because Yuta's curse technique won't negate concepts. Now even with this information I have no idea what his curses are, and Yuta could have some stored copy curse techniques, so I'll only use what I've seen so far. Yuta would pressure Kenjaku with Rika to get him to use as much curse energy and force him to expand his domain, and we will see some nice combinations between the two. Kenjaku will use his similar game plan of using curse spirits between hits to give him space between the two and counter attack when he can. As Kenjaku is getting pressured, he'll use anti-gravity in which Rika gets caught and Yuta evades, and Kenjaku will use one of the special grade curse spirits to fight Rika to keep Yuta and Kenjaku a 1v1. Now the reason for this, if Ryu and Uro could acknowledge that Rika would be an issue in the domain, I'd assume Kenjaku would have similar worries even if his barrier isn't closed. Kenjaku will say, "You've been pressuring me, but you still yet to pull out your domain." Kenjaku will summon his domain and Yuta will scream, "Tengen, the time is now." Now the reason I'm keeping the similar events as the Yuki fight is to run a simulation on the differences Yuta and Yuki would make to change the outcome. Even though, like I said, special grades fight alone, Yuta in this situation wouldn't ignore Tengen and why this scenario is focused on replicating some of the major things that occurred between Yuki and Kenjaku. Now with the domain brought out, we'd repeat the similar steps from previous, where we get that ominous miscalculation, and Yuta's simple domain, headcanon, would be stripped away and he would get hit by the sure hit of Kenjaku's domain. Now I said Yuta headcanning a simple domain, however with him learning a domain, I don't think it's out of the world to believe he has a simple domain as well. Similarly, Tengen would have completed the beatboxing ritual and stopped Kenjaku's domain, and we'd see a near lifeless Yuta on the ground with Rika just defeating the cursed spirits, now darting at Kenjaku. Now my headcanon is, if Ryu can box with Rika, Kenjaku should have no issues boxing with Rika either. For the sake of this, what if I'm going to give Rika a rage boost, and with Kenjaku's curse technique burnout, he would be surprised by Rika. So Rika sends a punch and Kenjaku about to say, "It's over Yuta." Yuta rises from the dead like Undertaker using reverse curse technique and screams "die." Curse speech affects Kenjaku greatly and he starts coughing blood. One big key difference between Yuki and Yuta in this situation is Yuta has a curse energy to be able to use reverse curse technique. He's also not going to be burdened by an output shortage like Bombaye was, meaning he can take advantage even being in a bad situation. While Rika sends a punch that sends Kenjaku flying and he begins to look a little stressed. Yuta does the hero speech, saying he won't let his sensei have to kill his best friend again, and declares he'll defeat Kenjaku. With Kenjaku's curse energy being inconsistent post-domain expansion, Yuta will use this situation to take a huge advantage and Kenjaku will be on the back seat. Just as when Kenjaku thinks it can't get any worse, Choso spawns behind him screaming it's parent killing time, charging up his piercing blood to attack his head. Now normally Yuta would never agree to have someone to help, especially someone who is important to someone he cares about. He'd rather take the burden himself to protect those he cares about. However, this is scenario 1, so we're getting a 3v1 team up versus Kenjaku, and will they succeed? Kenjaku will do his boxing move where he spins his head to deflect the blood, and Rika will then go for a punch and Kenjaku will deflect. Yuta then goes for a sword snatch which cuts Kenjaku, and one thing to note, these sword attacks will be far more dangerous than the ones used against Uro, as he will have killing intent. Kenjaku on the back foot is looking stressed. By the back of his head, he realizes his curse technique is very close to replenishing. Choso goes to attack as well, and they simultaneously coordinate attacks, and Kenjaku counters Choso and Rika, but Yuta contributes to getting meaningful hits. Kenjaku, now close to death, is huffing, and Yuta begins to charge up the curse energy beam he used in the fight against Ryu with Rika. While doing so, Choso goes closer to target the wounded Kenjaku, but Kenjaku smiles and activates anti-gravity, which sends Choso to the ground, and Kenjaku is left with a huge sigh of relief. As Yuta does the blast, Kenjaku uses reverse curse technique and dodges most of it, however his arm gets caught and he now has to waste curse energy again to re-heal. Kenjaku starts to assess the situation. Now Yuta begins to increase the intensity, as his time for Rika is slowly running out. Charges forward, and Kenjaku realizes and lets out multiple low-grade curse spirits to distract Yuta. Yuta uses positive output easily and destroys them, and Rika begins to come from behind Kenjaku. Unfortunately, the 5-second countdown for his curse technique is back, and he uses anti-gravity to keep them both in place. Kenjaku begins to summon an array of curse spirits, and when gravity activation expires, Yuta screams, "Rika, do it now." Rika, who shoots a weakened curse energy blast, while Yuta summons a microphone to try and end Kenjaku. Kenjaku then smiles, and while Rika destroys the curse spirits with the beam, Kenjaku says to Yuta, "It was a good strategy to use Rika to target me, while you could set up curse speech, but now I won't be caught off guard." Uses curse energy to cover his ears, and uses a combination of curse spirits and a mini Uzumaki to his head, and then the final mini Uzumaki to his stomach, which leaves Yuta with a donut. Rika screams "Yuta!" but as Yuta is about to heal, the ring expires and Rika disappears. Yuta now has his curse energy fully replenished and can still use reverse curse technique. However, he now has no curse technique he can use, and without the help of Rika and Choso nearly out of commission, Yuta has an uphill battle. Since it's Kenjaku, he'll probably start shit talking right now. And now, I don't think Yuta can win in this situation, and with Choso accumulated damage, he's pretty much out for the count. Yuta could heal him, but with no Rika wasting reverse curse technique on other people, doesn't seem like a smart decision. Without Rika and Curse Technique, Yuta would lack the AP to finish Kenjaku, which would lead him to winning. Even with this being a bad decision, I do believe in character Yuta would most likely go to try heal them. However, in this situation, I'll keep it focused on the 1v1 between the two combatants. Without Rika and Curse Technique, Yuta would lack the AP to finish off Kenjaku, which would lead him to winning. He has huge Curse Energy reserves, which would allow him to fight for long, but I just don't see any ways he can win in this situation aside from a domain expansion that we don't know what it does. In addition, with the context we got from Tengen, even if he uses domain expansion, there's a possibility with Kenjaku being an elite barrier user that his simple domain would be enough for his domain expansion. So now what would be the most in Yuta character thing to do? And that is to save Choso. During Sendai, he only got serious when civilians were in danger, and his first priority was to protect people. He only used Rika once he realized the collateral damage Ryu could do, and sent Rika to guard the stadium when Kurorushi fought Yuta. So it could be very in character for Yuta to prioritize the safety of Choso before himself. However, that's not what will happen in this what if. In the Yuki version, Choso being saved caught everyone off guard, because Yuki has been living selfishly for herself and even reaffirms she is focused on her own ideals and isn't necessarily on our side. But her choice to save Choso was a great moment for her and a subversive outcome. So in this instant, Choso would sacrifice his life to save Yuta, and Yuta would be the one to be saved. One, this would be an instance of Yuta living more selfishly and could be the catalyst he needed to awaken and set up for an even more hype rematch. In my opinion, if they were to have fought in the same situation, I feel Gege would have made at least 2 fights to set up the hype with Kenjaku. One taking the dub with getting Tengen, but now has Yuta to deal with again in a rematch in the future. It would also be the most unpredictable plotline because a lot of people would expect Yuta to have died, and in my opinion, based on what Yuta has shown me now, he's not currently strong enough to have changed the outcome and would have led to a very similar result, however sets up for an interesting rematch. Now with scenario 1 done, I'll now go to scenario 2, and rather than collaborating with Tengen, Yuta would decide to fight Kenjaku from the start on his own without needing Choso to show his curse technique. The reason I say that, it's in line with his character, and Yuta likes to fight alone and wouldn't want Choso to risk his life for his sake. In comparison, Yuki needed to talk with Tengen due to Star Plasma Vessel business, but Yuta really doesn't have any interest in Tengen aside from just the advice and planning for Kenjaku's invasion. The best he could ask is more info on Kenjaku, but even Tengen's bomb ass didn't even know Kenjaku had an open domain, so Yuta wouldn't waste time talking to that bomb. Man, I hate Tengen. So Yuta would start the true 1v1 with Kenjaku and would not use Rika from the start. Now to me personally, base Yuta was getting overwhelmed by Ryu, who I think Kenjaku far outscales Ryu, which means it'll probably go in a similar manner where Yuta tries to fight but is mainly using reverse curse technique to heal the potential fatal damage. But similarly, this won't be the same version of the Yuta we saw in Sendai from a mindset perspective. He has no civilians to protect, and 2 doesn't need to hold back to gain points, and 3 he has the biggest motivation with him declaring he wants to kill Kenjaku. This means he'll be a better version of that base Yuta we saw in Sendai, but with a lack of feats it's very difficult to determine how much stronger his true base is. Moreover, his use of partial Rika can be supportive, which can allow him to not be completely overwhelmed by Kenjaku. However, one thing that goes against Yuta is the whole arsenal of cursed spirit manipulation, which will just create a lot of chaos through sheer numbers. Now Yuta can definitely destroy all the cursed spirits no problem, but more so the abilities assigned will cause major issues. I believe once Yuta feels he is in an uncomfortable situation, he'll pull out the ring and the true fight between full-powered Yuta and Kenjaku will commence. My headcanon is Kenjaku's domain is better than Yuta, however we still yet to see how domains interact, and I do think Kenjaku was to use his domain, Yuta would either listen to Tengen or just pull out his own domain. One thing that becomes a key game changer is Rika, and how she would interact within a domain clash. If they clash and a tug of war occurs, their sure hits will be close, which could be a great avenue for Rika to go and attack Kenjaku mid tug of war. This could generally be a great way for Yuta to take advantage, however this is all headcanon. For the most part, with Yuta being focused on fighting Kenjaku 1v1, with the current capabilities and with him not having Sendai abilities or showing potential others he may have copied, even with his full arsenal I don't see the clash going any differently. Kenjaku's statement to Yuki, if you use your domain it might not have been so boring, does allude to better odds, but similarly it could still end up in the same result. With anti-gravity, curse spirit manipulation, I just think he has too much to deal with Yuta that even with the situation that he doesn't trust Tengen, I don't see the clash changing in result. Now there's also the Choso wildcard. If Yuta does a combination with Choso, they may have a chance to catch him off guard. For example, this scenario, Choso doesn't fight Kenjaku at the start or find out his curse technique, which means he won't be in near death's brink. Even if they do that, Yuta can heal him, which means there's a lot more utility to play and will probably be their best chance to pressure Kenjaku. Similarly, this is a double-edged sword, because we saw small curse spirits with Kenjaku's curse energy easily handling Choso. Now he can use top tier ones. It just doesn't seem like Choso will be of any big help in this clash to change the tide significantly, especially in this moment where he can use his full arsenal of curse spirit manipulation, that he can make up the sheer numbers of Rika, Yuta and Choso. And even though these curse spirits might not be that strong, just by having the sheer numbers allows him to maneuver in a different way. But this is a big reason why I think Yuta didn't fight Kenjaku then, because not only will he be far stronger, he also had the 1 month off where he could have got new curse tools and curse techniques. This alone changes the scope of the clash significantly. It will make the hype for Kenjaku versus Yuta more exciting. Now I know there'll be people who disagree with my opinion, so let me know what reason you have for potentially Yuta beating Kenjaku, or how differently this would have occurred. But in both scenarios, Kenjaku will end up with the victory.